Good morning. Good morning. On behalf of all of our colleagues here at UHY and our distinguished presenters, welcome this morning. Some of you might have had a problem on the southbound lane in Northway, but hopefully we'll all be safe and get here momentarily. But thank you for coming and welcome. I'm Howard Foote. I'm the managing partner of UHY New York Capital Region, and we're here and we appreciate your participation today in the UHY Annual Middle Market Manufacturing Outlook, a manufacturing inflection point. You know, we believe that all manufacturers now more than ever need to invest in their strategies that will propel them to be more successful in the next industrial transformation that we'll talk about today, or be left behind. So today we'll get a perspective on economic outlook, the political and geopolitical risks that we all face, artificial intelligence, Corey, industrial benchmarking, and how to drive growth and bottom line performance in our environment. We're joined by our manufacturing group subject matter experts, which we'll introduce in a moment, and a panel of nationally recognized leaders and experts in their field. At your place, you'll see that we have distributed, for your convenience, at your place, the agenda, the presenters' bios, and our latest UHY manufacturing image pieces, branding, communications for you to enjoy at your leisure. Before we do that, and before we start the program, just a little logistically, if you would like to, we'll continue the coffee and breakfast outside here for a period of time to get you set. The facilities are yours to use. Specifically, if you take a left, go down to the end of the hallway, the exit sign, you might find some facilities down there you might want to use. And before we start, I would just want to say thank you to Julie and Jessica for putting this together. And if you need anything during the course of these next several hours, the two of them are at hand to give us any assistance you might need. So thank you for that. We'll take a short break around 9:45, recommence, and we'll try to conclude by about 9:45. I'm sorry, 11:45. So with that, let's welcome Tom Alongi, our partner, my partner, to help us navigate the next industrial transformation. For more than 20 years, Tom has been given invaluable financial advice to public and private clients on behalf of our firm, with a primary focus on companies looking to maximize shareholder value through acquisition, profit enhancement, restructuring, and ultimately exiting their investments. Tom is our leader of the National Manufacturing Practice and a member of the National Consulting Practice. Welcome, Tom, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody can hear me? Perfect. Well, real excited to be here in New York. And for all those online, we actually have over 200 people actually joining us online this morning. So why New York? Why we take our show on the road? We think, is this maybe a turnaround point, an inflection point for manufacturing? So we've been doing this manufacturing outlook for more than 15 years now, and in our Great Lakes region. And so the focus of our presentations and our goal is, I know a lot of our accountants are going to hate this, but it's not around technical subject matters. It's really around thought leadership. Our clients more than ever need us to think about and be really advisors to them. And we really built a great team to think about your business from a holistic standpoint. And how can we help drive value? How can we help you change and adapt with what we see happening in manufacturing? So it brings us to, slide please, this industrial transformation. Let me ask a question. How many think that industrial, when you first saw this, you said, we are going to talk about Industry 4.0, connected devices, Internet of Things. show of hands, how many think that's kind of the next industrial transformation is Industry 4.0? Got to have some hands, right? Right. I have to say, I hate to say it, but we spoke on Industry 4.0 about 6 years ago. Past that, and something big happened that accelerated us past Industry 4.0 into this next industrial transformation, something called COVID, if we recall, that accelerated where we are. Disruption is the next industrial transformation. And you're thinking, Tom, we deal with disruption every day. Like, what do you mean? Like, not like this. The next industrial transformation will be the rate of change and the speed of change that you will see over the next decade will be astounding in manufacturing. Now, I've been a futurist and been doing this for 25 plus years, and I think I'm pretty right. I think this is where we're headed. And it's exciting because it's what's needed. And so, before I tell you about disruption, I just want to take you back, because I get this question, what happened to manufacturing in America? At a very high level, yes, we've lost more than 5 million manufacturing jobs. You think, oh my God. But we are better off today. Believe me, it doesn't feel like it. Because how did we get there? Well, very important point is I started my career in 1995 when manufacturing labor was going down, 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 down. Well, what kept us busy is the red line. Productivity, right? What did we talk about? Lean, Kaizen events, equipment that came out was faster, right? Productivity grew. But then we got to the 2000s, and all of a sudden it started just flatten out. And so where did capital really go? Where did it chase? Because if I showed you another slide of the service sector, employment is like this. We became more of a service-based economy. Nothing wrong with it. Happens to all developing countries. But now we're at an inflection point of what COVID really put a spotlight on. And the only way we're going to accelerate out of this, quite frankly, not the only way, but is how we're going to really gain and be competitive is through productivity. So a real quick, brief overlay is, when you go back, globalization, yes, as countries began to develop, and we said, hey, if other countries develop, we can sell our goods, and we can export them. And we did. But other countries became, China specifically, became very much a manufacturing powerhouse, right? They became, the leader in a lot of the commodity products. I don't know the percentage, but I just wonder what percentage of goods that are sold on Amazon come from are imported or from China. I gotta believe someone may Google search that and let me know. But I believe it's a pretty high percentage. Walmart, right? We got very used to low-cost goods, right? Nothing wrong. 2000s, the dawn of the knowledge age, right? The internet begins to take off. Doing business globally is easier, right? We began to outsource to low-cost countries. Who was really the best one at it? Apple. Amazing product at a low cost. This is great. We did have a period of time, yes, Obama period. Higher taxes. Higher taxes in manufacturing and disincentive had a big impact. We went through a period of very little growth, very little reinvestment during that period of time. We had the Trump administration that came in and said, wow, we don't make a lot of stuff. We have all these unfair trade deals. Maybe. We're going to put tariffs. Okay. So now we're going to kind of go back in time and try to turn back the clock. Is that the right solution? I don't know. Then COVID happened. And it changed everything. It was a light bulb moment, correct? Wow. We don't have PPE. We don't have ventilators. We don't make a lot of stuff. Where's our supply chains? All our manufacturers, like, oh, all my material, I couldn't get anything. The cost of freight went from $1,500 a container to $7,500, $10,000, right? We said, wow, what happened? And so we realized this. Biden comes into office and he orders Executive Order 14017. I have to say, this is a pretty good report, if you ever read it. Bipartisan, like. And I had to take one line out of there because that sums up my career and what I've worked on and our team has worked on endlessly with all of our clients for 25 is our small and medium-sized businesses, they did. You saw it here in Buffalo, Pittsburgh. I witnessed it in Detroit, right? Hollowing out of manufacturing. You thought, God, that's just terrible, right? But the reality is that as countries come and develop, what we lost, we gained. Because those that compete on cost definitely have an issue. Definitely were the first ones to chase the lowest cost labor. Those that compete on value are able to change and adopt automation, heavy engineering, right? Highly valued product, and that's who we became, and that's awesome. So what did the government response really come about and say? You know what? And not only that, the auto sector said, we can't make cars, we don't have chips. We can't, we have a big disadvantage in electric battery, As we were trying to change and adopt, China went all in. I mean, their government subsidized like crazy the electric car industry and said, we're going to be the next global powerhouse. Come chase us. So we said, okay. So we came out with the CHIPS Act. We came out with the Inflation Reduction Act. And those were real pivotal, obviously, in what you're having here. You have what we're excited about is a Micron chip plant here in New York, right? And so we're going to see, what did we see? If I showed you industrial construction, the chart looks like this. It's happening. We're in the second or third inning of this construction. And then we said, I don't have people. I have all this opportunity all of a sudden. We went from zero to, because of the tariffs and the supply chain, where can I get it domestically? I can't. I got to build it. So I got to build out the supply chain. And we throw in inflation, right? So what's that return going to be on that inflation with these investments? It's probably to be determined. But right now, the path is, under this administration, it's energy, it's battery, it's chips, and that's the core foundation of investment. So that brings me to disruption. Some will say it's chaos, some say I think it's opportunity. It's one of the greatest opportunities we've had in decades for U.S. manufacturing. But I do believe we have a very short window to take advantage of this. Because if we don't, these developing countries will find a way and do it. And you say, well, we're going to put tariffs on everybody. We're going to protect our industries. I don't know. Ask Brazil how that went for them on their 35% tariffs on vehicles. Oh, I'm going to build in Mexico. I'm going to ship through Argentina. I'm going to avoid the tariffs. Or, final assembly, BMW or some of the others, I'm going to ship almost a full assembly car, but I'm going to leave the tires and the wheels off, so it's not full assembly. I'm going to find a way around it. And that's what will happen with tariffs. We will find a way around it. BYD will find a way around it. So short term, you'll get A political bump, you'll get a little bit of protectionism, absolutely. But long term, you better find a way to compete. So we have geopolitical turmoil. We have wars going on, right? Okay, it's a great opportunity for defense. We have climate change, right? Agree with it or don't agree with it, whatever you want. It's ESG. A lot of that, it's here. I mean, other countries are ahead of us. Some are not. I mean, the biggest contributors, China and India, are not. But there's a lot going on. The labor force. You ever look at our K through 12, where we stand in the world? We stopped educating. We missed something. And this is a big hole. This is not going to change quickly. Will technology replace that? Black swan events. I don't know. Is there maybe another strike in the East Coast port here? How about that supply chain disruption for all of our manufacturing clients? Right? Strikes, with crazy weather we've had. I mean, it's just another COVID-2. I mean, we have to deal with. Globalization, it's not stopping. If it's not China, the new darling seems to be Mexico. Is it Indonesia? Is it the Philippines? The world's not going to stop. And we're going to chase, for those that are competing our costs, we'll find a way. We're entrepreneurs. That's what we do. Can we build out the supply chain fast enough in the U.S. to compete? I think we can. We always do. Technology. You'll hear from Corey. Corey will talk about the technology takeover. Is it AI? I have many clients going, I don't know, we're looking at it. I don't know, it doesn't really fit. I don't know what that means, whatever. And then I go out, and I went out on a prospect building automation equipment. He's like, yeah, he goes, we're using visual identification, AI, to detect part defects. So on this particular line that was as long as this room, I took out 6 people. Okay. Political chaos. I don't know, is there a little election coming up? Where does that send us? I mean, that type of uncertainty is very disruptive to industry, right? Right, wrong, left, right, whatever it is, it's disruptive, right? So this political disruption is met with all these risks, okay? I wish I had time. I mean, we're going to talk on our panel. I'll dive into some of these a little bit deeper, but the biggest one to me, believe it or not, when I step back, is that manufacturing the last couple of decades, it's really been starved from capital. Private equity, that I work with, and they're like, we're looking for like a highly engineered, no competition type company. I'm like, where? What? Like, there's not that many of them, right? And where did that capital go? Apple, Facebook. I mean, it chased all these tech companies, right? It created some of the greatest. And you look at the Fortune 500 companies, top 20. I don't think there's a manufacturing company left down there. It's all service. So how do we have to show that there's an opportunity for capital to come back into the space. And so manufacturing will get reimagined. And I'm seeing it. Many of you maybe not. But it's happening, believe it or not, actually out in California. There's companies out on the West Coast that are reinventing how manufacturing is done from a lights-out operation using every technology, every innovation you can imagine. It's amazing. This company is on their 3rd plant, believe it or not, building parts for the military. So manufacturing will get reimagined. And how about the price pressure that we're feeling? This is where our advisory team has been so busy right now, is helping clients in the middle market from procurement to shop floor, how to compete. How do we get lean and mean during this uncertainty so that we are in a position to grow? Commodity shortage, you're going to see it. I mean, from tariffs. Actually, a new tariff just went into effect going in tomorrow. I think I have an e-alert going out on that. 100% on Chinese vehicles, another 25% I think on aluminum. I can't remember the exact, but we're going to throw some more tariffs. So that's going to disrupt the supply chain once again. So as a small supplier, company that's less than 500 million in revenue, 500 employees, thinking, where do I do with those costs? And you go to your customer and they're like, well, I'm not taking that. And so it becomes a battle. So we have to learn how to compete. And the technology push down, and I'm going to steal Corey's thunder, is real. I don't know the exact timing. I don't know where it lands. Some will embrace it and adopt it faster. Some won't. So that sounds great, Tom, but all these risks and like somewhat sounds a little bit depressing, but this is the greatest period of manufacturing has ever witnessed. This is the most exciting period of time for manufacturing. Commercial aerospace. I think Boeing has a little bit of issues. What about the backlog of Airbus? Oh, or Boeing. Oh, you want a new jet? Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll get that to you in like 10, it might be 15 years. But don't worry about it, we'll get that to you. How about that supply chain, right? Electronics and battery. If you remember when Tesla built their first battery plant in Nevada, all that equipment I don't say all of it, but majority of it, came from overseas, came from China, most of it. So think of the opportunity in equipment, automation, and some of my fastest growing clients right now are in that space. And it's amazing, some of the products that they are building. It is truly astonishing that we will see productivity gains coming out of it. Medical and pharmaceutical, obviously we realize that we maybe do have a little bit of a risk. We probably do need to have some of our supply chain here from a national security standpoint. So you're seeing, I read stories, so-and-so's, coming back. But those companies are really competing on, that's a value play, not so much a cost play. Really excited here. Micron's going to be here in New York. We think there's the supply chain ripple effect of that is amazing. We think there's opportunity in this space tremendously. Energy is, I don't know, I guess the sky's the limit. I would say on solar, I think we're still waiting for that breakthrough in technology. I think a lot of there is capital being poured into the space. We're not quite there yet. I know there's some existing, that's another tariff that's going on, actually is on solar. We're trying to get our U.S. operations, to be able to compete with foreign, whether it's fair trade or unfair trade, but that's an area of opportunity. In mining, one of our associates brought up to me that, we have a client that's, doing mining, and I'm very excited about that space because, Biden came out and said, hey, we want you to make, we're going to give you the credit for the vehicle, but the battery has to be more than 50% made here. I went, yeah, where's that? We don't have the critical mineral. China has over 70% of lithium and cobalt. So we're gonna have to mine. We're gonna have to get back to mining. We're gonna have to get over ourselves, about environmental impact. I mean, lithium is not very environmental friendly, no doubt. But if we want to compete here, we're gonna have to do some of these things, right? So in defense, geopolitical, we have lots of wars, lots of things going on. How we go to war, drones, what we do is really changing. And the most exciting opportunity in defense is this.
Mr. Lewis and I are going to build ships together, great big ships.
If you remember from that movie, Pretty Woman, what was he trying? They were going to what? Buy this desolate shipyard and break it up and sell it out and liquidate it. Today, the Navy is trying to buy back, build back. Deloitte got a $2.6 billion contract to help the Navy redevelop their supply chain. So, I mean, will this happen in 2 years? I don't know, but keep this on your, this is going to happen. So right now, China's building 3 to 4 major naval ships, and we're struggling to produce one. Now, can we do it? I think it's an amazing opportunity, and it's an amazing opportunity for everything manufacturing, from fabricate, I mean, it's endless. It's endless. So, strategy to compete. I'm going to talk more of these on the panel. I'm short on time here, so I want to keep it rolling. Is foster a culture of continuous cost improvement. What that means is that this is something that we are really working on. Think of yourself and act like private equity and say, how do I reduce my costs? Instead of saying, instead of just hitting the easy button on everything you're buying, right? We have a team that basically helps look at and negotiate with you all of your spend, right? And we've been saving clients millions of dollars. And it's not just on the spend, but it's also on the shop floor. Position yourself for some of those new market opportunities that we talked about. We have Dan Bruce, who leads our strategy team. We're doing a lot of this. We have a lot of this research on some of these end markets and the opportunities. Now, does this stuff happen overnight? No. This could take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Build and operate, and this high mix, low volume. This is where it's going to be. There's lots of customization, lots of differentiation. Really great. It's most prevalent, we see it in automotive. So we have our automotive outlook October 17th in Detroit. And we've done this for, talked about this high mix, low volume and helping clients be able to produce at this level. Reinvest, reinvest. Don't wait. Like, you need to start your own apprenticeship programs. You need to build that scale yourself. And the amount of equipment reinvestment is huge. Align with capital. Think there's more capital coming in the space. I'm beginning to see it. I just saw Monroe Capital is getting $500 million, or I can't remember the exact number, for the U.S. government to invest in. They're focused on the auto supply chain, but there's going to be more capital. So you are going to see, where we've been a very private directed capital investment, I think you are going to see, depending on the administration, a more government directed capital allocation. Like it, not, right? That's what you might be seeing. On your desks or on your tables in front of you, it's a little bit on us. Most importantly is on the back. This is how we look at your business holistically. And, I'm happy. We'll talk more on the panel, but I want to get this kicked off and introduce our next speaker. I'd like to introduce our next speaker is Hugh Johnson. Obviously, Hugh is very well known, I think, in this region. He's a chairman emeritus at Gray Point. Hugh is an economic advisor and is chairman of the State of New York Assembly Committee on the Ways and Means and an adjunct professor. Hugh has been appointed to the Investment Advisory Committee of the New York State Common Retirement Fund. Hugh serves on boards of Security Mutual Insurance Company and a Pursuit. Really excited to hear Hugh's economic outlook, because everything I just spoke about really depends on a very strong and robust economy. So Hugh, take it away.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. And thank you very much for inviting me. Howard, everybody, nice to have you here. I had a good friend at SUNY in economics, Walter Goldstein. And Walter Goldstein often introduced me to groups such as this And he said, Hugh usually tells a joke and then he gives a forecast. He added that it's sometimes difficult to tell which is the joke and which is the forecast. I won't tell you a joke. I will, though, however, and again, I know I got a little bit of a pressure on time, so I'm going to try to get through a lot of material as quickly as I can and also have room for, now again, it's not a joke, it's a true story. And the true story is that in I think it was 87, when Alan Greenspan was selected to become the chairman, elected to be nominated to become the chairman of the Federal Reserve to replace Paul Volcker, USA Today called me and asked me for my thoughts or comment. And I said to USA Today, well, look, Alan Greenspan is an extraordinarily good economist, but I think he lacks Paul Volcker's depth of understanding of the Federal Reserve System. And the next day on the front page of USA Today, not the money section, but on the front page of the newspaper, it said, Hugh Johnson says Alan Greenspan lacks Paul Volcker's depth. That was it. I said, wait a minute, that's not what I said. So about a week later, I was having lunch with Bill Seidman. I don't know if any of you remember, Bill Seidman was chairman of the FDIC. And I said, Bill, you don't suppose Alan Greenspan reads anything as trashy as USA Today? And he said, oh, no. He said, no. He reads the USA Today. He reads everything, doesn't miss a thing. So I went back to my office, and I wrote a very carefully worded letter to Alan Greenspan, wished him the best of luck. This is a true story. Chairman of the Federal Reserve, told him all about the quote, told him I was misquoted and everything, and that was it. 2 days later, I got back a handwritten note from Alan Greenspan that said, I missed the alleged quote, but thanks for bringing it to my attention. Been close ever since. At any rate, let me, first of all, make sure I understand how this works. No? Okay. I'm gonna eventually tell you exactly what I think lies ahead for 2025 and 26 for the economy, for employment, for the manufacturing sector of the economy. If I can get to it, manufacturing sector, inflation, Federal Reserve policy, short-term interest rates, long-term interest rates, and stock prices. I'm going to give you the complete panoply of what I think is going to transpire in 2025 and 2026. Let me start by just simply saying I've studied all of the economic cycles since 1890. Not a particularly exciting life, but nevertheless, that's what I have. That's what I've done. There have been 25 cycles since 1890. There have been 25 bull markets and 24 bear markets, one still to come. There also have been stock market declines or corrections along the way. Now, the difference between a bear market and a stock market correction is that a bear market is a 10% correction in stock prices that's accompanied by an economic hard landing or a recession. A correction is a 10% decline in stock prices that is not followed by or accompanied by an economic recession. We've had actually one of those in this cycle, incidentally, that began in March of 2020, the coronavirus crisis. But anyway, it began in March of 2020. We've had one correction that started in January of 2022 and went through October of 2022. It was a 22% decline in stock prices over 9 months. So that's what we've seen so far, and that really raises the most important question that you face today, and that's simply this, and that is, will there be a bear market? A bear market that's accompanied by a hard landing or a recession? Will there be one in 2025 and 2026? And I'm going to try to answer that question today. I have methodology I've developed, and again, this shows you I have a pretty uninteresting life, but a methodology that I've developed over the years of being a professional in this business. The methodology really consists of two simple steps. The first step is to identify all the important trends that are unfolding in the financial markets. The reason that we do that is because each cycle has really three parts. A stock market cycle that's followed by an economic cycle that's followed by an interest rate cycle. And what I've learned is that the financial markets perform in very specific ways at the beginning, the middle, and the end of each cycle. So if by looking at the trends that are unfolding in the financial markets, you can identify where you are in the cycle, then making good or easy becomes easier to make good investment decisions, and I might add business decisions. It becomes easier. It doesn't become easy to make those decisions. So that's the reason why we look carefully at the trends that are currently unfolding in the financial markets. Now, I presume this goes back. The second step in the whole process is to identify important trends that are unfolding in important monetary and economic variables. The whole purpose of this step is to decide or determine if the trends in the financial markets are consistent with a rational forecast for what's going to happen to the economy. Are investors rational? Is what are investors saying consistent with a rational forecast for the economy and earnings, inflation, and interest rates? Now, ordinarily, things are going along in a very rational way. The performance of the financial markets is very consistent with a rational forecast for the economy and earnings. But eventually we start to move from what might be called rational to something that is a little bit less than rational. Optimism starts to give way to exuberance. Exuberance starts to give way to euphoria. Investors become, either for the market as a whole or for an individual part of the market, investors become speculators. They borrow money to buy equities or other assets at prices that are arguably overvalued, with the hope, the dream, the fantasy that they're going to become even more overvalued. Probably the finest statement that I've ever seen or written about this event or this type of event. Again, Galbraith, the circumstances that induce recurrent lapses into financial dementia have not changed in any truly operative fashion since the tulip mania of 1636. It happens again and again. The defining characteristics of this speculation, and again, rational markets start to become a little bit less than rational. The defining characteristics are, first of all, borrowing or leverage. In other words, individuals borrow money to buy assets at prices that are overvalued with a hope, dream, fantasy. They'll become even more of it. The second thing is optimism, which gives way to exuberance, which gives way to euphoria. The percentage of small investors that are positive or bullish on the stock market becomes very high and very widespread. And then the final thing, of course, is that the asset itself becomes very overvalued. Charles Kindleberger is probably I don't know if you've ever read Mania's Panic. You probably haven't read Mania's, Panics, and Crashes. Write it down, read it. It's the best book that's ever been written on the financial markets. Kindleberger, who used to be a professor at MIT, and I knew him extremely well, one of the most entertaining people that I think has ever written about the financial markets. He calls himself a historian, not an economist, and his book is just absolutely remarkable. But I remember one thing he said. He said, there is nothing so disturbing to one's well-being and judgment as to see a good friend get rich. This leads to the monkey see, monkey do financial market environment, which leads to widespread speculation. The stage of speculation is followed by the stage of, let me go back, is followed by the stage of gives way to the stage of financial distress. And the stage of financial distress, the speculators begin to have difficulty making their debt service payments. Some do not and default. The banks and financial institutions that financed the speculation begin to have cold feet and start to back away from the markets, and the prices financial distress, start to give ground. And that's replaced by or gives way to the stage of revulsion when there's a veritable race for the exits. I will warn you all, and I warn you all that in the stage of revulsion, there's the revelation of swindles and scandals that occurred during the stage of speculation. And one of my favorite Kindleberger comments of all time, this you've got to think about, is that the urge to swindle and the urge to be swindled. There's a sucker born every minute. The urge to swindle and the urge to be swindled runs parallel to the urge to speculate. I have been told suggested to me that the performance of the S&P 500, the performance of artificial intelligence stocks in 2023 and 2024 is an example of a speculative mania. And then to some extent that makes sense when you think about the S&P in 23 and 24 up up 15.7%, actually up 42%, and without the artificial intelligence stocks, it was only up 15.7%. Also, when you think about the S&P 23-24 up 42%, the so-called Magnificent Seven, or artificial intelligence stocks, up 102.1%. When you think about 23-24, the S&P up 42%, the so-called Magnificent Seven, and that's the NVIDIAs, and it actually includes Tesla, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, Apple. I know I didn't name them all, but you get the idea. Some of you are familiar with the stocks that are included in the Magnificent Seven, again, up 102%, and then NVIDIA, again, 23-24, up 502.1%. So there's a legitimate question as to whether that qualifies as a speculative mania and that we should be very careful. I would add, and I have this as a part of but I would add that that has changed, and has changed in the sense that artificial intelligence stocks are no longer leading the bandwagon in the stock market. They've come down and are performing somewhat similar to the S&P 500, suggesting that the period of speculation and the period of financial distress is now upon us with artificial intelligence stocks. And of course, we're going to have somebody, Corey, is going to talk about artificial intelligence. I won't begin to tell, but the difference of opinion on what the outcome is going to be, the outcome for productivity and gross domestic product as a result of investments in artificial intelligence, the differences of opinion between those, for example, at MIT, who I've talked to, and also those at Goldman Sachs, who I've also talked to, the difference of opinion is incredibly significant. It's very widespread. So there's a lot of questions about when we're going to have a payoff, and if anything, and I look to you, Corey, to hopefully get at some of those answers from the investments that we're making in artificial intelligence. Will the companies that are making the investments in artificial intelligence ever make money based on the enormous amounts that they're currently investing in them? Okay, that's enough on speculation. That's a part of the current landscape and is important to think about or to know about. Now I'm going to talk about the market trends, and I'm going to talk about the trends in important monetary and economic variables, and hopefully I can get all this done in a really quick period of time. First of all, the market trends. The stock market, if we go back to the bottom of the correction in October of 2022, has been headed higher. It's up 59.2%. Investors have been optimistic, overly optimistic about the performance of the equity markets and have bought. Equity market performance has been very high. In addition to that, investors have migrated to the so-called bull market sectors, or the more economically sensitive, more volatile sectors of the markets, the sectors of the market that tend to respond well or do well from an earnings point of view when the economy is expanding. Again, technology, communication services, industrials, discretionary at the top of the list. And of course, the safer sectors of the market, investors have been migrating or avoiding the safer sectors, which include utilities, consumer staples, and healthcare, the sectors of the market that tend to post or provide pretty good earnings regardless of what's happening to the underlying economy. A very positive signal. In addition to that, growth stocks, stocks which have higher price earnings ratios, have higher growth rates, have been outperforming value stocks fairly consistently. Value stocks, of course, being stocks that have lower price earnings ratios, higher dividend yields, generally speaking, than growth stocks. In addition to that, quality spreads, or the difference between the yields offered to investors that buy investment-grade bonds, the difference between the yields on investment-grade bonds and on U.S. Treasury securities continues to come down. And that only happens when investors become increasingly more optimistic about prospects for the economy, or prospects that the issuers of those investment-grade bonds will continue to not only survive, but meet their debt service payments. It's also the case that below investment-grade bonds, junk bonds, the spreads between the yields on junk bonds and the yields on 10-year U.S. Treasuries, for example, continues to narrow or come down. And again, a sign that investors, even in lower grade securities, are becoming increasingly more optimistic about prospects for the economy and prospects for the companies that are the issuers of those bonds. One troublesome, somewhat troublesome, not completely troublesome, yeah, but somewhat troublesome, that we talk a lot about when we talk about the financial markets is the so-called yield curve. Sorry to become a little bit technical. It is a little bit technical. It really measures the spread between the yield on a 10-year Treasury and a 91-day T-bill. That's the one that really you should watch. There are other ways of measuring this which you shouldn't even pay attention to, but this one you should pay attention to. Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York tracks this every month and also calculates the probability that a recession will occur within the next 12 months based on, again, that spread between a 10-year Treasury and a 91-day T-bill. And as you can see, and I will just tell you that the probability is now 61.8%, that within the next 12 months, a probability of a recession will be 61.8%, again, based on the calculations of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This yield curve has been inverted for a long time, and there hasn't been a recession, so there's a lot of skepticism about the value of the yield curve. Well-founded, I might say, speculation. But that's one sort of signal coming from the financial markets, which is not very comforting. The question now is, if you take a look at the performance of the markets have been going up. Investors have been migrating to the so-called bull market, or more volatile sectors of the market. Yields, spreads between investment grade and lower than investment grade, below investment grade, junk securities and 10-year Treasuries has narrowed. All of this seems to suggest that prospects for the economy, or the economy, will continue to expand in 2025 and 2026. And the question is that rational? When I try to answer that question, which is not easy, I often get into politics, I'm going to just try to divide it up into really two distinct periods of time. And I'm going to try to get through this really quickly so I can finish my speech on time, but my comments on time. There have been two distinct periods. The first period, of course, is 2020 and 21. In 2020-21, the Federal Reserve leaned towards, and again, remember, this was a time, and I just remind you of these numbers. These are staggering numbers. In the second quarter of 2020, the U.S. economy contracted 28% at an annual rate. The highest number we ever got on record was 10%. It was 28% in the second quarter, and we lost over 20 million in the second quarter. So naturally, you had a response by the government, a response by the Federal Reserve, and a response by the federal government in Washington. And the Federal Reserve increased its assets, or its holding of financial assets, by $4.5 trillion. And the way they did that is they bought securities from banks, from insurance companies, from hedge funds, and believe it or not, they even bought securities from individual investors, $4.5 trillion. That's a big number. The federal government in Washington, through things like the CARES Act, you remember that, American Rescue Plan, increased their spending by $2.1 trillion. And as a result of that, just as you might expect, the money supply increased by $6.2 trillion. The average increase, $6.2 trillion, and I might add that was 28% per year. The highest number we ever had was 13%. That was 28% increase. 10 minutes, I'm told I have. I don't know how I'm going to do this. But at any rate, so that's 6.2 trillion. So predictably, consumer spending increased, and as you might expect, in 2020, 21, and 22, the rate of inflation, remember, spending increased substantially. Obviously, we had a significant increase in inflation. It went from 1.2% in 2020, 4.7% in 2021, and 8% in 2022. The name of this game is money, folks. Don't ever kid yourself. Obviously, with the increase in the unemployment rate to 8%, that brought a change or a shift in policy. And in the second period, in the period of 2022 and 23, the Federal Reserve did not increase their holding of financial assets. They reduced their holding of financial assets by $2.1 trillion. And the way they did that is all the securities that they bought in 2020 and 21, they sold back to those very same customers. And guess what they did? The customers paid for them, which reduced the size of the money supply. The federal government reduced spending by $1.1 trillion, again in response to the increase in the unemployment rate to 8%. And the money supply declined. It didn't continue to expand, but declined by $7.93 billion in 22 and 23. And spending, of course, but the real surprise is spending continued to increase, so the economy continued to expand. So that's the real puzzlement, and I'm going to get through this real quickly. The real puzzlement is we went from a period when the money supply expanded, the economy expanded. It actually contracted 2.2% in 2020 and expanded 5.8% in 2021 as the federal government and the Federal Reserve stimulated the economy. It worked. And then in 2022 and 2023, the federal government and the Federal Reserve contracted and reduced the money supply. The money supply declined. And what was the big shock was not only did the money supply decline in 2022 and 23, but the economy continued to expand despite the fact that the money supply was actually declining. And the question has come up, how in God's name did that ever happen? How did you get an expansion in the economy, despite the fact that economic or money supply growth went from the 28% down to a minus number? And the answer to that question is, and here's where my friend Walter Goldstein again came in. He used to look at me, God rest his soul, but Walter used to look at me and say, "It's velocity, Johnson. Wake up, it's velocity." And he was absolutely right. The amount of velocity or the turnover of the money supply accelerated. When people are worried about inflation, they not only get a paycheck, but they spend it very fast. They get the paycheck and they spend it fast because their expectation is, well-founded expectation, is that prices are going to go up in a week, and therefore they better spend it now or it's going to cost them too much more. So velocity increased. In other words, although the money supply contracted, it was the case that the money supply generated a high level of economic activity, and despite the negative growth in the money supply, we get positive growth in the economy in 2023 and 24. Let me tell you, folks, it is remarkable what this Federal Reserve has turned off. They have increased interest rates, as we all know, until recently. They have increased interest rates, and despite the fact that they've increased interest rates and increased interest rates a lot, despite the federal government has reduced its spending and has reduced its spending a lot, we've had positive economic growth. And the reason we've had positive economic growth, I point to velocity. But that never has happened before. It has never been the case that the Federal Reserve, trying to reduce the rate of inflation, has leaned towards restraint, and you still got a soft landing or positive economic growth. Ordinarily, that ends up with a contraction in the economy or a recession or a hard landing. I'm going to skip through and get right to, I think she's going to hold up a sign any moment now. There's a lot of details. It's a lot of detail. But let me just tell you this one. This is one of my favorite slides because it's so obscure. How much time do? Okay. Okay. All right. I was told to stick to, the whole deal. At any rate, this is one of my favorite slides. Some of you may know Ed Yardeni, of Ed Yardeni. You see him on CNBC all the time. And Ed's a good friend of mine, and we were both invited to speak at a conference at the Moscovy Center in San Francisco. And Ed had a terrible time because he showed up and he sounded like a godfather. He was up there, he could hardly barely talk. And so it was my job to then talk about Ed Yardeni's comments. Like a godfather. And the only thing I could think of saying, and I have no idea what inspired me to say it, I said, what do you get when you cross a godfather when an economist? I said, the answer is you get an offer that you can't understand. But at any rate, he taught me this. And it's the ratio of coincident economic indicators to lagging economic indicators. And just instinctively, if you think about the names, coincident to lagging, it gives you a little bit of a sense of the momentum in the economy. Coincident to lagging. And what we've seen more recently, which is very encouraging to me, is that despite the fact that leading indicators for the economy have been declining for 30 months, it's the case that the economy is now starting to pick up momentum. So the message of the financial markets collectively is positive. The message of the financial markets is that the economy will continue to expand through 2025 and 26. And although it's going to be a close call, I look at the leading indicators, I look at that yield curve, although it's going to be a little bit of a close call, I would say given the momentum in the economy, I think that the outcome is going to be positive for 2025 and 26. Maybe it's just because I'm a congenital defect optimist, but that's what I think is going to be the outcome. Okay, let me give you the numbers, how it's going to play out in 2025 and 26. The economy is going to expand about 2%. What you should pay attention to is the numbers at the bottom, which give you the numbers for the year. And as you can see, we're going to be close to, in 2025, close to the 2% number, and in 2026, also close to the 2% number. That's precisely the number that was forecast by the members of the Federal Open Market Committee at the Federal Reserve meeting this week. Secondly, employment, non-farm payroll employment, although it's likely to weaken or slow down or soften some in the third quarter, which are past, and the fourth quarter, and also the first quarter of 2025. In 2025, second, third, and fourth quarter, non-farm payroll employment is likely to get a little bit stronger or get improved. And again, that's consistent with that 2% growth rate in the economy. The unemployment rate Again, it will probably go up a little bit from the current level of 4.1% up towards the 4.3% or 4.4% as we have somewhat softer employment conditions in, again, first, second, and third quarter, first and second quarter anyway, of 2025. But then it's likely to come back down as we get to 2026. Manufacturing. This is going to be a real positive. Manufacturing grow from the 1.7% growth rate in 2024 up to 2.3, 2.6 in 2026. And then when you get to manufacturing employment, 17,300 jobs added in 2024. That'll go up to 102,700 jobs in 25, and 2026, 150,000 jobs. I would add, you're going to see a similar growth in two of the more important components, shall we call it, important components of manufacturing, motor vehicles, computers, and also to some extent in research and development. But certainly motor vehicles and computers should show much better numbers in 2025 and 2026. I'll just stop there and remind you that you can get these slides, a copy of these slides, a copy of these forecasts or my numbers from somebody here. Just leave us your card. Okay, inflation. Just as we have leading indicators for the economy, we have leading indicators for inflation. The leading indicators for inflation, my guess is, and again I'll go to the numbers, is that pay attention to the consensus here, not me. I've been wrong on inflation too many times. Pay attention to the consensus, that's been pretty right. And as you can see, the rate of inflation as measured by the year-over-year change in the personal consumption price deflator, which is what the Federal Reserve pays most attention to, and which I pay most attention to, is likely to continue to come down or decline through 2025 and 2026. You don't see 26 down at the bottom. See that? Okay, everybody with that? Inflation continue to come down. If you put the combination of an economy which will be slow in, say, the fourth quarter and the first quarter, maybe the second quarter of 2025, together with continuing or ongoing declines, continuous declines in the rate of inflation, the Federal Reserve is going to do just what you probably already know, and that is that the Federal Reserve is going to continue to reduce short-term interest rates. They reduced short-term interest rates, surprisingly, by 50 basis points at their September meeting that we just passed. They're likely to reduce short-term interest rates again at the November meeting. They'll reduce interest rates again at the December meeting. They'll reduce interest rates one time per quarter as we move through 2025. If the Federal Reserve is reducing short-term interest rates, it's not a big reach to forecast that longer-term interest rates are likely also to decline. I'm going to let you just take a quick look at this, because I want to say something about this. But this is a decline from its current level of 3.74% on a 10-year Treasury, and the consensus has it declining to 3.70% in the fourth quarter of 2025. See that? And I have it going down all the way to 3.16%. I think I'm right. I think that the consensus is going to be wrong. But nevertheless, pay attention to that 3.70%, and I'm going to tell you why in just a minute. That's what the consensus believes. Stock prices are likely, in my judgment, they're likely to, this says, go up in 2025 and to reach in the fourth quarter of 2025, 5,700, okay, and also to go to 6,600 in 2026. Now, here's why I wanted to mention this. The numbers that the consensus has for the 10-year Treasury and for stock prices for 2025 fourth quarter is exactly where they are now. Holy smokes. Which effectively means that investors collectively have priced in all of that good stuff that's coming in 2025. And that frustrates the shit out of me. So what we need, first of all, I'm going to warn you, I could be wrong. I know that's surprising, but I could be wrong, believe me. I could be wrong, but what that means to me is that I would like to see right now, and I think I'm starting to see it in the artificial intelligence stocks. We're not getting the leadership from them that we did get before. I would like to see a decline of 6 to 8% correction in the stock market to get us to a level that makes more sense. Now, you as investors are saying to yourselves, what should I do? And I'm going to tell you, because I could be wrong, and I'm going to also tell you because if we're talking 6 to 8%, ignore it. Ignore it, because the most important thing I will tell you as investors and business people, quite frankly, the most important thing that I've ever heard said is that it's time, not timing, that's the secret to success as an investor. And I've seen that, being at this for a long time, I've seen that over and over and over again. There's much more that I could talk about because we have also some things about my forecast, and I might add, I get this, I'm going to turn this all over to Don. He's the person who understands this, so don't pay much attention. I do think, and I don't think you should pay attention to me here because this might be just wishful thinking, but, and I'm not going to tell you what I'm for or anything like that, but I do think the outcome will be Harris will win by a little bit, Republicans will take the Senate, and the Democrats will win the House. I'll let Don say, here are the kinds of things that we could go wrong for Harris. We have a September non-farm payroll number coming up. If that's really a weak number, below 100,000, Trump is going to jump all over it. A decline in stock prices, a decline of that 6 to 8% that I've been suggesting or forecasting or hoping for, I think also could be something that could probably hurt her. If September consumer prices exceed 2.5%, core over 3.2, these are the things I think that could go wrong between now and the election that could, I don't want to say derail the vice president's bid for the presidency, but would maybe give her some difficulty. The last thing I will talk about is there are three things that I've been in. It's very hard. There hasn't been a whole lot that we've been able to get our teeth into about how they stand, how the candidates stand on some of the important issues. Trade, obviously tariffs, the deficits, and Federal Reserve policy. And I'm just going to tell you, clearly, Trump wants to increase tariffs, 10% on everybody except for China, 60%. I think that's what they need. A lot of this work has been done by the Wharton School, and so it's not me really talking. To some extent, it's me talking. Deficits, Trump's $5.8 trillion. It'll be less than that because there's some growth in some of the things he's offering. So he's going to have, over 10 years, a $4 trillion deficit. Harris, it would be $1.2 trillion. Maybe that's going to be a little bit higher, something around $2 trillion over 10 years. So Trump would be a little bit higher on deficits. And then one thing that's very important to me is the Federal Reserve. And Trump has suggested that the president have a say in interest rate cuts, reductions, or increases. That means reductions. Harris has said, hands off the Federal Reserve, which is very important to me because that's very important. Okay, we've gone through a lot. I think what I'm telling you is that you have to look forward to, or we have to collectively look forward to, and I think not only me saying this, but the Federal Reserve is saying this. I'm saying something that surprisingly comes out very consistent with the Federal Reserve's forecast that we saw last week. A real positive environment for 2025. An economy which continues to expand, slows but continues to expand. Employment, which is a little bit tough in the first part of the year, but eventually will turn around and the unemployment rate will come down. In response to what we see going on in the economy, inflation will continue to come down. The Federal Reserve will lean towards less restraint, reduce short-term interest rates in 4 quarters of 2025, and also continue to do so in 2026. That'll lead to declines in long-term interest rates and better stock prices from hopefully a little bit lower level. And so I think it'll be a good, and I also say it's going to be really good for manufacturing, where you're going to see a big lift in manufacturing. You're going to see that in motor vehicles, you can see it in computers and everything else. And I've had enough to say, and I really appreciate being here. And hopefully you write these notes down, and much more hopefully they come true. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hugh. I'm getting old. I need my glasses. Thank you so much, Hugh. I really appreciate it. Really, reinforces our sentiment on what we see in manufacturing, what we, kind of outlined in the opening commentary, that we are very excited about the prospects of the future of manufacturing for sure. So one piece of that is productivity. Well, how do we get that? Corey McNeely is going to join us. He is a managing director at UHY Consulting. Corey's really, he's a tech guy for sure. He's a part of our consulting's transformation solutions group, providing performance improvement in global operations environments within the emergency management, security, manufacturing, defense, etc. Established leader with more than 20 years of experience in process improvement, regulatory compliance, etc. I also want to mention that if you want to have any more food, that is going to be taken away at 10 o'clock. There is beverages, but I just want to mention that. So I just want to welcome Corey talking on AI.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to actually hop on up here, and we're just going to kind of take the center stage, discuss a very hot topic. There's a lot of questions, comments, concerns about AI, but I want to kind of level set with you so you understand the historical context. A lot of people think AI is something brand new. It's been around a lot longer than you think. But what's really interesting about this new endeavor in AI is the speed of adoption and how quickly it is becoming disruptive and morphing. The reach we're going to talk about, and then I'm going to kind of go into some practical examples that I've seen or I've seen coming and how they're being used. But more importantly, we're going to talk about some of the considerations if you decide to go down this path. Okay, so AI, theoretically, the concept was actually talked about in the 1700s. There was quite a few little books written about it, talking about machines acting like humans. But in 1950, an individual, Alan Turing, came up with an idea on computer processing and being able to go through. As you start looking at the timeline taking place from the 50s into the 60s, there was a morph that took place. MIT came up with a chatbot that was taking place, emulating human communication. It wasn't well received, it didn't work real well, but step in the government and DARPA decided to start working on special projects in which they were able to take large volumes of tap information from the FBI and distill what was taking place in these conversations, mainly used in RICO. And that kind of built some different technology that went in. You fast forward a little bit and you get into IBM. They decided to come up and start playing in this realm. They came up with a chess bot originally. They came up with various tools. And then as things started to progress, more from a processing standpoint, not necessarily a language standpoint for developing these tools, AI started to take off. And you'll see on here, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, they're all the same thing. They're all subsets inside this technology, and they're used interchangeably. What the game changer that happened was right around 2018. ChatGPT starts coming onto the scene. And ChatGPT was very, very unique. So we see these disruptive technologies sitting here, whether it's Netflix, Facebook, whatever you use. I mean, even internet is very interesting. But you can see Netflix, it took 3.5 years to get to 1 million users. That's amazing. They slowly knocked Blockbuster out of the competition and everything moved on. You can see right there, Instagram, 2.5 months. ChatGPT, whoops, how do I go back? There we go. ChatGPT, 5 days to hit 1 million users. Think about how quick that disruption hit. I'll be the first one to admit, it took me over months. I didn't want to touch it. I've worked with machine learning back in 2008 through 2015. What I saw ChatGPT was parlor tricks. Essentially, I could ask it a question, I could ask it to make a joke about somebody, I could have it pull up information, and that was about it. The value of it was minimal to me, but I did pay attention to it. I wanted to see what direction it was going. And you can see, from 2018 to 2023, there are so many different models coming into play. This isn't even accurate. We got 4.5 and we got O that's sitting out there. When you see on the side parameters, that's little factoids that are in there. So 1.7 trillion facts are at your fingertips and growing. These models grow, they continually grow. They also continually hallucinate. They will come up with facts that they make up, making sense. AI is just a predictive technology. It predicts what's going to come next. If you ask it to complete a joke, a duck walks in, it's going to say a bar, because that's the most common thing it's come across on the internet, or whatever's being fed into it. So these models, while being extremely powerful, are also extremely dangerous, because it's all based off the information that you put in. And as you start using this in business, and if you start with your own clean models, the key is having good data, and you'll have better results that take place. So AI in the world, it's everywhere, okay? You probably first started noticing it when you called your bank and nobody answered the phone and you got this computer. Hey, what do you want? You really notice it when you start looking at Amazon. You could be talking to your spouse, and next thing you know, here's an advertisement for something you never needed to buy, but it's telling you you should buy it because it heard that conversation. AI has been integrated into just about everything. Entertainment, you see all the lawsuits taking place because I can fake an entertainer, come up with a great video, sometimes do that with office coworkers for jokes, make them into a movie star. But you're seeing this filter into everything, everyday life. And what's really interesting about it is the leaps and bounds that are taking place associated with it. Before, you would have much higher error ratios, 40%. Then it started dropping down. Right now, you're looking at about a 2% error ratio that takes place on a lot of these things. AI relies solely on data and predictions. It does not replace your employees. It does what your employees do a lot more effectively, so it allows them to focus on value-added activity. You don't want somebody always pushing paper if you can use a computer to do that. You don't want somebody always drafting a CAD document if a computer can help them do that, because they can focus on more value-added activities. And we're seeing a leaps and bounds in manufacturing and healthcare. Healthcare, we're seeing predictive technologies telling doctors which procedure is going to have the most likely positive outcome, what treatment plan is going to work. But in manufacturing, we're seeing a lot of items being focused on from the supply chain, understanding disruptions in the supply chain, quality-related issues that are taking place in manufacturing, and predictive technologies to help forecast demand based off previous demand. So let's take a look at these three. Ignore the one, Boeing, because that one I'll get to, but Airbus and Lockheed Martin have been using AI technology. Airbus is using the AI computer vision to expect for defects and flaws. It is a very simple concept with some complex equipment that takes place. And I've used it personally in my personal life, detecting errors in association to parts that I've manufactured. Essentially, it is high-speed precision cameras that take a look at what you're producing, and it can detect a millionth off on a part if it's calibrated properly. So that's enabling them to go through and produce some of these parts at a much higher pace than having manual inspections take place time and time again. You still have some manual inspections, but it automatically rejects something saying, hey, you got to take a look at this, get a master tooling guide to take a look, do your measurements, work through it. It's speeding up that production process. Lockheed Martin is also using some of this for bringing people in from an HRIS management standpoint, a training standpoint, optimizing the workflow of the workforce and helping with some quality control. Now, Boeing, everybody knows the quality of Boeing. These initiatives came about after some of the problems that they were having with the doors, with the bolts, with things taking place. And they decided to start using some virtual reality to help with the maintenance process so that individuals can see what it's supposed to look like compared to what they're actually looking at right now. All of these technologies, you see, these are huge companies, absolutely huge. When I did my first AI-type project, it was almost $50 million budget. That's not affordable for most people. The technology pricing has dropped dramatically now. You can do some of these things for under $12,000 a year, just depending on what you're trying to do, how precise you're trying to get, and more importantly, if you have clean data and clean ingestion of data from your organization, you can start off from scratch and get these things up and running anywhere from 3 to 9 months, just depending on what you're trying to do. A couple other tools that are taking place out there from a quality standpoint. You have a lot of predictive technologies morphing. You know, when ChatGPT first came out and you Googled artificial intelligence, you would find 1 or 2 applications. You heard Meadows trying to work on it. You heard about a thing called Claude. Now you Google AI and you get 50 million different hits of different companies doing it. It's the speed of these products being taken out to the marketplace. So when you start looking at the quality aspect, the changes that are taking place are phenomenal. I had mentioned earlier that I had 2 parts that I decided to play with that I manufactured. I used a camera system to take a picture of each part. It detected a millionth variation off a single piece from the other piece. I didn't train the model. It took me 5 minutes to be able to get it to do that. I have the luxury of having my own AI lab that I built. Yes, I'm a geek. I want to prove that the stuff works. But as you start expanding into commercially available tool sets, these prices, these competitive advantages become real. And when you start thinking about one of the more important things of real-time monitoring of production, it takes all the information of your supply chain, your human capital, the predicting rates of some of the machines going down and potentially taking you out of production to be able to help forecast your production activity. One of the really cool things that I see a lot of our clients starting to gravitate to is right here in design. You can take a SolidWorks file and AI will point out various issues with it from a testing standpoint and theoretical standpoint. If I'm using an aluminum alloy, 6400 versus 9000 ballistic or something along that lines, it'll tell you how it works out. It'll also extract the information to build your bill of materials and import that into your ERP system. The simulation and testing, very powerful. I had mentioned that in medicine. There's also some very interesting tools used in defense, especially around energetic material and how it reacts in various scenarios and how it can be used and harnessed and minimized. The other thing sitting here is the routine task. Okay, how many people like entering expenses into their system? You know, I travel, I have to enter in my expenses. I hate it. I'm lazy. I wrote a bot to do that for me. And it's gotten so easy to the point that somebody with some basic computer skills are able to do that. Are they able to do it the first time off? Probably not. If you're a coder, maybe you can. But these systems are now pulling out things that are amazing. There are 4 main big AI platforms out there. Everyone's heard of ChatGPT. You have Llama, which is Meta's product. I think it's at Llama 4 right now. You have Gemini, and then you have R. Each one has a unique difference. One of them's a great generalist tool, like ChatGPT. It's a pretty good tool, does just about anything that you want it to do. Gemini is fantastic for coding. If you have somebody that does a lot of work that has to come up with technical coding, mathematics. R is basic statistics. It's based off the old R statistical program, and it's very heavy on that. Each one of these tools are unique. Each one of these tools now cost under $100 per month for the platform, the high-end platform. If you're doing enterprise, obviously it goes up because you have thousands and thousands of people using it. Procurement, it's another good use case sitting here. You can analyze the data to take a look at your performance from your actual supplier. You're able to take that information from, let's just say, recalls, defects. You can start storing that and do correlations based off of when you purchase something, whether or not the quality was up to your standards, whether it deviated from the standards. You know, sometimes, especially when you're dealing with metals, ferrous metals, certain times of the year, you might have some more issues with that because of humidity coming from the south, was where I live. Some of those steel coil rolls start to get rust on them. You're able to start tracking that versus before when you had a little board and you're doing the check marks. And then the system can optimize that procurement side. It allows you to do some more informed purchasing versus gut check. And I know a lot of people love to go with their gut. What's real interesting is if you have somebody that is extremely well-versed in a particular aspect, let's say quality, procurement, or whatnot, you can have them help build these models to bring in their knowledge into it, and the computer will replicate it. This eyesore here kind of tells you everything that you need to know about AI. There are a lot of considerations, and I want to start with the very first important consideration is data. A, data quality. B, data security. Okay. If you're using any of these tools that are not privately hosted, that you don't own that instance, that information is going to go everywhere. It's going to become public. I can tell you horror stories that I've heard of where individuals got their audit report and decided to upload it to AI and say, hey, how do I remediate these issues? And next thing you know, when you put in that company's name, here's their audit report. And all that information is now public. You can get it out of the cloud, but you're going to be spending millions and millions of dollars to get that out. So I always warn people, make sure what you have is private instance. Never put up anything confidential because you'll never get it out. The second thing that you need to think about is your workplace impact. Okay? Individuals' jobs will change if you start integrating AI. You can make their life a lot easier by helping them adjust to that transition immediately. You work with them. Everybody likes to know what their job's going to look like in the future. AI helps simplify a lot of things, but it also allows them to perform more complex tasks. Upskilling your employees become easier because you can even use AI to build training models so that they can go and ask questions. It will talk to them in the tone that of your audience. You're able to start making those things more relatable to them and be able to pull that information back. We talked about a little bit about ethics and security and privacy. There is a lot of disputes going on in the legal community about ethics and AI. What AI can do, what AI should do, what AI shouldn't do. One of the bigger things you're seeing in defense is automated detection systems for removing potential threats. That is something that is real. That has been around since the 80s. But that technology is now moving into the real world, specifically being, I guess you could say, pilfered from autonomous vehicles. That detection information and the computer algorithms are basically the same thing. You can identify a figure. If you go to Amazon right now, you can buy a CCTV camera for about $49 that detects humans walking across your property. It's the same type of concept. And we're going to see some changes in the legal landscape. Europe's already working on regulatory concerns about that. The US is working on regulatory concerns about how you can exploit AI. The other thing is, with AI and any technology out there, what man makes, man can defeat. And you know, when you take a look at ChatGPT, if you ask it something off-the-wall question like, how do I build an atomic bomb? It's not going to tell you. But if you ask it in a different way, you're going to get that information. And there's also cheat codes that get published on the internet left and right on how to destroy these models. The reason I'm telling you that is when you're in business, if you're using AI for your manufacturing, if you're using it for your reporting, or any automation on that, you want to make sure it's private, because then those cheat codes don't work. You control the data that's in there. You can limit what data comes in or out. The sky's the limit, but you're able to actually put those controls into place. The next thing that I really want to focus on, forget about all the stuff sitting here of real-time analytics and ROI. Continual improvement. These models learn from themselves as long as you correct it. And the best analogy I use for AI is it's a child. Think of a 3-year-old child with Albert Einstein instincts. Okay? Has all this intelligence, but it will go rogue once in a while and you have to spank it to get it back into place. These models are trying to use the information they have in the best way possible. And I have designed a few different tools that we use internally, and it will just come up with some crazy results based off the information we have in. But once you start talking to it, treating it like a child, training it, over time it starts delivering the consistent results time and time again. I will tell you this, if you go down the AI path for any of these applications, either analytics, data transformation, compliance, training, it will take a minimum of 2 weeks to get it to a point where you're willing to show that to somebody else. Continual improvement, just like in manufacturing, is critical in AI technology. When you have the AI objects sealed off from the rest of the world, your support becomes a lot easier because it's not getting filled with garbage. A lot of these models do get filled with garbage coming off the internet because it's scouring everything that's out there. But if it's just using your intellectual property, it becomes a lot more effective, it becomes a lot more targeted, and it really does make your life easier. Like I said before, I was a huge skeptic. I still am to a certain degree. I've seen how it's changed, I see the controls that are being put into place, and I see the value in it. It is going to continue to grow. We heard about the stocks skyrocketing. That was ridiculous. I think that was speculative. I don't think that that's truly sustainative when it comes to these AI stocks. But the technology, when you think about it, from 2018 to now, how it's changed so dramatically, the speed of change that's taking place is ridiculous. And they're anticipating that ChatGPT is going to have probably about 4 more models within the next 18 months. If you look at the most recent released model, I bet Albert Einstein would have a hard time stumping it on the way it thinks. Now, some of the theories that come out of it, I don't really trust it, but I can find out where the sources are and see where it came up with that delineation. So you're going to see this change dramatically. You're going to see in manufacturing organizations start using this, especially in procurement, especially in customer service, and in design. Those are the big areas where the manufacturing software companies are focusing and bringing in AI technology. The price points continually go down, but the benefits are going up because of the productivity gains that you're getting. And the best thing about it is you eliminate potential failure points because you're learning from some other experience. The machine can already tell you that there's going to be a failure point here. They use it a lot in engineering. They have for quite some time. Manufacturing is now catching up. The last 2 points. AI doesn't fit every model. It doesn't. When you start looking at these types of initiatives, start with the end in mind. What do I want to get? I know a lot of people see these new technologies and they try and adopt it immediately. This is what I want to use. I want to go forward with this. There's a lot of companies that have wasted money trying to implement AI. There's a lot of companies that try and force it into various areas of the organization, and it's not worthwhile. you really need to start with the end in sight. Understand what you need, understand how you're going to get there, and then you start taking a look at everything else. How good does it need to be? Okay, I need a precision rate of 99%. All right, how do I get there? I really need to look at my data. I need to look at my processes. I need to make sure everything's well documented. Like I said, it's a child. What you feed those systems is what's going to be produced out of it. It's not going to fix everything. It's going to make your life a lot easier. With that being said, don't rely solely on one technology. The technology has some variables still in place. If you're going to use something, have another technology validate it until you know it's 100% sure. It's a cheap insurance policy. You're talking minimal dollar investment. You don't want to run critical decisions based off a computer. You want to have some human touch in there, but then you also want another computer to validate it. You will see over the next few years another explosion take place. This is extremely disruptive. It's disruptive from the human capital. It's disruptive from the production standpoint and additive manufacturing and 3D printing with the integrations that are taking place here. This is something that's not going to go away. It is something that we have to wrestle with, and each organization is a little bit different. There are going to be companies that rely on AI 90, 98%, and then there's going to be companies where it's about 5. So take time, don't rush into this. That's the biggest concern, the biggest issue we've seen. We see companies that jump full board into it, and then they have to back out. It's kind of like when you do a selection for a new software to run your entire organization. Penny wise, pound foolish, that's AI. And AI in a nutshell is basically no longer talking about the artificial intelligence of some of the employees I've worked with in the past, but now it's talking about the intelligence of a computer being able to surpass what all of us can do collectively. So with that being said, thank you so much.
Thank you, Corey. We are going to take a 15-minute break. Corey brings up some really good points. I feel like we're still in the first or second inning of AI, but you need to begin that leap now, even if it's baby steps. We think it's a really, really important strategy to pursue. Thank you. We'll see you in just 15 minutes here. everyone could take, no. If everyone could take their seat, we're going to get started. Really awesome, all the networking. That's great. Appreciate it. We're going to get started and get kicked off here. Yeah, thank you. Real excited. Our speakers, Hugh and Corey, have been excellent. Really appreciate it. Real excited about our next speaker. He's in the hot seat right now with all these election results going on. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Don Levy. Don Levy is the director of the Siena College Research Institute. He has been instrumental in focusing Siena's college polling, not only on national, stateside, and local, but also as an economic, social, and cultural, which is important to all New Yorkers. He has been director of Siena Research since 2007. Siena College Research conducts regional, statewide, and national surveys on business, economic, political, voter, academic, and historical issues, and I'm sure he'll expand on that. I'd like to welcome Don Levy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be with everyone today. Really an interesting group of speakers. So I'm going to take us in a slightly different direction. The Siena College Research Institute, as Tom pointed out, we do a number of different types of public opinion research. What most people hear about us for is our political work. We have been conducting for the past several cycles the New York Times Siena poll, as well as polls here in New York under our own label. Additionally, we're excited, as always, to do a great deal of economic polling. We do the Index of Consumer Sentiment here in the state of New York. And for 18 years, we've interviewed CEOs of companies across all of New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and the last couple of years nationally on how CEOs feel about market conditions, their expectations for the year ahead, the challenges that they face. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. We have been very happy over the past couple of cycles to be named the most accurate pollster in the United States for the political work that we do, that being by 538.com. It's sort of a pleasure to speak to a group during this period of time about something other than just politics. I've been doing a lot of speaking engagements over the past couple months, and of course the first question that anybody asks me is, hey, who's going to win? So I don't know. So I won't even begin to try to tell you that. I will, if you're interested in our input on politics. Certainly we are consistently out with political polls. We'll be out this Saturday morning at 5 a.m. with polls in the great states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and of course everyone's primary interest, the 2nd Congressional District of Nebraska. Certainly go to our website if you're interested in those, or my other recommendation, if you're a political aficionado, take a look at the polling aggregation sites where the poll that we may do becomes a data point, and you can kind of break out some of the noise when you look at that. But that's all really I'm going to say about the national political scene, unless we have some time in Q&A. So let's talk about this project. We were extremely happy to work with the National Association of State Chambers of Commerce and UHY on a national survey of CEOs with an oversampling of folks in the manufacturing sector. So we had representation from CEOs across the country. Now, I will caution you that whereas our political polling is resolutely intense. I mean, we have quotas of every different type of individual when we'll do a political poll. This poll is a little bit more anecdotal. We did have nearly 400 CEOs across the country participate, and I think that what they had to say and the time that each of these CEOs took in filling out the survey is highly informative. But despite the fact that we had surveys from across the country, we did not necessarily have a representative sample of all CEOs, especially across the manufacturing sector. Still, I think that those approximately 100 manufacturing CEOs that we spoke to can certainly add some depth to their experience, their perception of the marketplace, their short and long-term plans that I'll share with you today. So the survey asked 4 questions at the beginning to try to gauge how CEOs feel about the marketplace. Do you think things are getting better or worse? Both in general, your perception of the economy, as well as within your industry. Here you can see the green bars are good, the red bars are bad. And so when CEOs were asked, do you think that things have gotten, current economic conditions have improved or worsened? You see that a majority across the manufacturing sector feel as though economic conditions in their perception have worsened, that only 14% feel that of late conditions have improved, and you can see quickly that when you compare manufacturers to the balance of CEOs who took the survey, that the perspective of the manufacturers are slightly worse. Moving on to, there we go, future expectations, we can see that similarly, the expectations of CEOs, despite Hugh's comments, continue to be somewhat negative, that 49% of CEOs in the manufacturing sector feel as though business conditions over the next year will worsen. That is their sense, that is their projection, that is their feeling. Only 20% feel as though conditions across the economy will improve. We asked them about their own industry. What about conditions within your field? And you can see that by and large, manufacturers have the same sense. Slightly greater percentage, up to 28%, feel as though conditions within the manufacturing sector will improve. Now, we take these 4 questions, CEOs' perception of current economic conditions, both in general and within their industry, as well as their expectations for the near future, both overall and within their industry, and we pour those together into a single index score. It's called a diffusion index. A score of 100 would indicate that optimism and pessimism are equally balanced. You're certainly looking for a time, a score that conditions that score ends up being greater than 100, and you can see some variation depending on the region of the country. Our friends in the South, Corey and I were talking about Kentucky briefly, are far more bullish than in other areas. The Northeast, and Heather has had to sit through this presentation innumerable times, tend to have a far more negative perception of the economy, both current conditions and the future. Now, when you compare the manufacturing sector to the overall perception of all CEOs, you can see that the manufacturing CEOs that we spoke to are more negative, more pessimistic than the CEOs across all the other industry sectors that we interviewed. You can also see in parentheses, those numbers in red are the national numbers from a year ago. So across the entire nation, we saw a decline in the perception of the economy across the CEOs from when we took the survey in the spring of 23 to when we did it again in the spring of 24. And you can see, those of you who are in New York, that the upstate New York numbers are even slightly lower than the Northeast in general, and other sectors of the country follow suit. So certainly in the survey, we found an entirely different perspective amongst many of the CEOs that we interviewed across all industry sectors, as well as manufacturing in the South. Their perception was that their relationship with local and state government, their opportunity to have a workforce, were far more bullish in the South than across the balance of the country. Okay, let's look at some individual aspects of the CEO's perception of what lies ahead in the year ahead. Here you're looking at their expectations for both revenue and for profit. Again, you can see a difference between the expectations of manufacturers, where only 26% anticipate increasing revenues over the coming year, as opposed to 40% of CEOs in general. Similarly, when it comes to profitability, 27% of manufacturing CEOs are anticipating increasing profitability. That's juxtaposed to 7 points higher, 34% of CEOs in general. What are these CEOs doing in order to enhance their profitability? Now, when we conduct this survey, sometimes I'll describe it, and we really appreciate the participation of the CEOs who take some time with this. This survey can take them as little as 10 minutes. Some tell us that they'll spend an hour or so filling it out. And as you all know, being the CEO of a company, whether you have 50 employees or 5,000 employees, is not only a demanding job, it can be a little bit lonely. And we always appreciate that these CEOs will take the time, and we recognize that a little bit like, we're their accountant, we're their attorney, we're their priest, that they will explain to us how they feel. So what are they doing? What are they doing to enhance their profitability? Overall, CEOs are doing the business of business and trying to enhance the demand for their product or service. An interesting difference that we recognized amongst the manufacturing CEOs, that 38% indicated, and the single most cited strategy of the four that we offer is cost reduction. They're trying to find ways, whether it's the integration of technology, AI, or other changes to cut costs. Cost reduction also tends to speak to just simply trying to do more with what they have. So 38%, almost twice the rate of CEOs across other industry sectors. We asked them about, what are you going to concentrate on? What is going to be most important to you this year? And overall, you can see that expansion of existing markets, technology innovation at 32%. These are the numbers of manufacturing CEOs that you're looking at right now. Slightly different across some of the CEOs in general. I didn't cite those numbers there. But for example, expansion of existing markets was cited far more often among CEOs other than amongst manufacturers. How about AI integration? To what degree do you plan on using smart factories, AI? Do you think that that will enhance your productivity in the coming years? Certainly, that was one area that we anticipated seeing a greater percentage of manufacturers indicate that that was something that they planned on incorporating into their productivity. 9% a great deal, 31% some, so about 40%, slightly fewer than half of the CEOs in manufacturing that we spoke to, indicated that they planned on incorporating AI into their productivity. Perhaps it's a little bit of the input that Corey was sharing with us. Perhaps CEOs simply don't know what to do with it. Is it going to enhance their profitability? That number drops a little bit amongst manufacturers. So about 10 points lower, 29% of CEOs feel as though the integration of artificial intelligence into their business operations will enhance their profitability. Fixed assets, are they going to be investing in their business? Always an important indicator when we do this survey. Sometimes people will sit back and they'll look at those index numbers and they say, well, Don, you just said that we're looking for an index score of 100. 100 is a score where people are equally balanced between optimism and pessimism. Does that mean that we're headed for a recession? Does that mean that CEOs anticipate a difficult year? The degree to which CEOs tell us that they plan on investing in their business, buying additional fixed asset, whether that's equipment, technology, is an indicator that they are doing the business of their business. 57% of CEOs across manufacturing say, yes, indeed, we plan on investing in fixed assets this year. Fewer plan to invest in assets relative to responding to the demands of climate change. Now, I promised you I wouldn't talk much about politics, but within the survey, we did ask CEOs, most specifically about fixed assets, are you waiting for the results of the election in order to make your decisions? And we did find that 44%, nearly half, said, yes, indeed, I am waiting to see what happens with the election before I make those significant allocations of resources. Now, we also did ask the CEOs, who do you think of the candidates running? And remember, this survey was taken when Joe Biden was the Democratic candidate for president, not Kamala Harris. At that point in time, of the manufacturing CEOs that we spoke to, by 55% to 20%, they said that they would prefer a Trump victory rather than a Biden victory. When we asked them similarly, which of the two parties would you prefer? Which of the two parties do you think would be better for your business and business in general? In both cases, these manufacturing CEOs decidedly said that they thought that Republicans gaining control of the Senate and retaining control of the House would be better for their business. Concerning challenges that they face, and thinking about the challenges your company faces, which would you, are you concentrating on? And you can see that rising supplier costs, again, amongst manufacturers, is something that 2/3 of all CEOs indicated that that is something that they are concerned with. Healthcare costs, taxation, governmental regulation, and of course, some sort of adverse economic conditions, read recession there. So there's certainly a long list of concerns that they have. Rising supplier costs is significantly higher amongst manufacturers than it is across CEOs in general. That number across other CEOs falls to about 50%. At the same time, we asked the CEOs, you face these challenges, you're concerned about taxation, you're concerned about governmental regulation. What do you think about the role that various levels of government are playing in your business success? What sort of grade would you give the federal government, your particular state government, and or your local government? The CEOs, whether we're looking at manufacturers or CEOs in general, give the federal government abysmal grades. Single digits say that they think that the federal government is doing either an excellent or good job of creating a business climate in which they can be successful. They have a considerably, collectively, higher impression of state government, although interestingly, that's sort of pushed higher by the CEOs that we interviewed in southern and Midwestern states as compared to CEOs that we interviewed in the Northeast or in the West. Where do they feel as though government tends to understand what they're trying to do and where government can be a more effective partner? It's on the local level. So CEOs were generally split close to 50-50 on the grade that they provide local government on issues like zoning issues, et cetera, that they are concerned with locally. And we asked them about some of the pieces of federal legislation that the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, to what degree have those pieces of legislation benefited them? And we were, again, a little bit surprised. It might be indicative of the sample that we had. The greatest one was the Inflation Reduction Act, where 21% of the manufacturing CEOs said that they felt as though that piece of legislation had benefited their business. Slightly fewer, 9% on chips, and on the infrastructure, about 1 out of 7 CEOs said that that had a direct beneficial effect on them. When we asked them about tariffs, we had a mixed response from the CEOs. 28% felt as though the tariffs that are in place currently, or currently as of when they took the survey in the end of May and June, that those tariffs had benefited their business, but slightly more, 36%, felt as though those tariffs had been a negative impact. What are they looking for state government to do? Of the following, what would you like your governor, your legislature to do in order to enhance your ability to be successful? The one I'm going to focus on more than anything else is workforce development. The manufacturing CEOs that we spoke to, over half said that that's an arena that they would like to see local government, local state government do something in order to enhance their ability to have a suitable workforce. Now, are they looking for workers? Are there an adequate supply of workers who can step in right away and participate in their success? Now, only 13% of the CEOs in manufacturing that we spoke to indicated as though they felt there was an ample supply of trained workers ready to step in and work for them right now. That's slightly lower than across all CEOs. Across everyone, that number approached 20%, but only 13% say that there is an ample supply of workers. At the same time, 1/3 of the CEOs in manufacturing said they are looking to increase the size of their workforce. So there's a decided tension. On the one hand, they're saying we need state government to participate in workforce development. There isn't an ample supply of workers ready to step in, and I need people in order to provide labor at my business. Who plays the biggest role in workforce development? Overwhelmingly amongst the CEOs that we spoke to, they said it's they themselves. It's they themselves who are engaging in mentoring programs, internship programs, apprentice programs, really dwarfs the participation of any other group who could contribute to this workforce development enhancement. Local community colleges, trade schools, they perform about a quarter of the lift there, but overwhelmingly they say that's something they have to do themselves. How would you rate your state's overall efforts to promote workforce development? Again, a failing grade. This is a loud and clear voice amongst the CEOs in general, and most specifically in manufacturing, saying we have opportunities at our companies. We need people, but the state government is simply not participating. Would they be actively participating in workforce development partnerships? Absolutely. Over 2/3 say yes, they would. On the right-hand side, I'd just like to call your attention to that one, because that really kind of struck me, that question. As you consider your company's success, to what degree has a lack of available skilled labor made it difficult for you to be successful? And I see some heads nodding. It's clear and unambiguous. 85% say that is at least to some degree true. They feel as though certainly if they had more skilled labor who could step in and contribute today, they would be more successful. They have the jobs available, they have the orders available, and it's not uncommon for CEOs to write in the comments, I have orders that I am not taking. I have an entire shift I could put on that I am not able to staff. So they are telling us through this survey that if they had additional skilled workforce, they could be more successful. In fact, somewhat controversial question, 58% of them indicated that if there was a manner in which it could take place in a productive way, they would be open and welcoming to migrants to the United States being trained to fill these spots that they need filled within their companies. Now, if I haven't kind of taken a little bit, sobered you a little bit so far, we ask in this survey the CEOs to comment on the quality of the preparedness of applicants who walk in and present themselves for employment at their places of employment. Now, these are the grades amongst the manufacturing CEOs. Excellent, good, only fair, or poor. And we ask them to describe, to grade the applicants that they see walking in the door on these 7 aspects, these 7 qualities that I think most people would tend to agree these are some of the qualities we'd like to see in new employees, folks that we are about to hire. And even on technical skills at 17%, which rated the highest of these 7 attributes, it still is a negative statement. Now, you could say, okay, perhaps these CEOs are a bunch of cranky people who are just, being overly judgmental on the quality of job applicants. And even if that is to some extent true, I think this is a really dramatic comment. And certainly, when I've shown these numbers to folks in the field of higher ed, community colleges, they are taken aback by these. So they're calling for not only people to be more prepared to contribute in technical skills, their ability to communicate, whether verbally or in writing, but also the comments on initiative, work ethic, professionalism are indeed quite negative, and the manufacturers, I will share with you, are even more critical in their assessment of the workforce than the CEOs across other industry sectors. How are they doing? I mean, this one won't come as any surprise. How are you doing with your recruitment and your retention? Are you having difficulties there? And you can see that overwhelmingly in terms of recruiting for new positions, 2/3 say, yes, indeed, I'm having a problem there. Over 1/3 are having difficulty retaining. They certainly shared with us the variety of different strategies, whether it's increasing compensation, being more flexible with hours to whatever extent it's possible, less so in manufacturing, to have flexibility in work location. They are trying everything that they can possibly try to recruit and to retain. And specifically, when we ask manufacturers, which type of worker is it that you're having the most problem with, 79% of manufacturers told us that they are having difficulty recruiting skilled labor. 79. And almost as many, 65%, said that they were having difficulty recruiting semi-skilled labor. So certainly this is a dramatic problem that this group of manufacturing CEOs told us loud and clear. They're looking for participation on the part of state and local government. They're looking for participation in terms of local community colleges. And they feel as though a tremendous degree of the burden for recruiting, training, and integrating a workforce that they're not terribly satisfied with falls upon them. So 85% told us that they lack the available skilled labor in order to be successful. Certainly is an arena that we as a nation, in order to have some of the dramatic success that is apparently, in terms of economic indicators, available for many of these manufacturing business, but we need the workforce in order to make it happen. They're challenged by governmental regulation, taxation, certainly remain challenged by the pressures of supplier costs, and the focus of this presentation anyways has really, I thought, tried to indicate the degree to which workforce is a problem. It's not simply for these CEOs a statistic. It's not simply, to what degree are we going to have increased employment figures in some of the numbers that we saw, but this is every day. This is, do I have people who can work the equipment that I have on my shop floor to meet the orders that are already right here in front of me? So loud and clear, workforce is a problem. And this is just one quote that one CEO offered. Our biggest competitive expansion challenge is workforce. We're unable to find even remotely skilled machinists these days and are leaving money on the table due to lost work. We could probably double our revenue within a year if the workforce were available. We appreciated the opportunity to conduct this survey and to listen to what these CEOs in manufacturing shared with us. And I think this part of their message certainly was loud and clear. So thank you very much.
Don, thank you so much. That was really spot on. even for the number of respondents, I think it echoes across the regions of, I've traveled all over the United States, and, that is the sentiment is, and you think of, why, right? Well, remember that chart that I showed you, that last decade of, there's just no growth in manufacturing. So we didn't have people going into that, it was kind of a low wage and, low cost environment. Times have changed now. And so now we're trying to change the trajectory so prevalent. And, we're excited. We will get there. We will find a way. I know we will, because where there's demand, we will ultimately meet the supply. But we now are going to put Heather on the spot, given from a government standpoint here a little bit. Heather Mulligan is President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State. Really excited to have her join us. New York State, the primary statewide association advocating for New York's business community. Ms. Mulligan is a dynamic leader, trusted advisor, and champion for economic growth, good jobs, and strong communities across New York. I know we'll talk a little bit more on her background on our panel, which I will be joining. Howard Foote will be moderating. And so we're going to be tackling some of these very challenges that Don just brought up. The focus of our manufacturing outlook, I kind of started out with a macro view, and we're kind of growing down. So let's take the stage.
Fluffy pillows.
Good. Before we get up there, just to echo what Tom had said, we're very fortunate. I would just want to take a second to bring some enthusiasm to the fact that UHY is very appreciative of the opportunity to bring us all together, and more importantly, to bring these experts, subject matter experts and regional and national leaders to the floor to have a conversation about what the manufacturing sector and the next generation of that transition looks like. And I would just tell you that we have a very, very strong affinity with all that, the leaders that have been here today. And if you wanted to reach out directly to Hugh and his firm, please feel free to do that. He's done a great job in our community, and many of you have seen him in other presentations. So feel free to do that. I'd also tell you that we have a very, very strong affinity with Siena College and everything that Don does, and all of us are so very proud of what he brings to this community in terms of the recognition nationally in his polling and in the Siena College Research Institute. At any time, he's looking for bigger and better opportunities in terms of providing surveys and opportunities to understand what you do in communities, and I'd ask you to reach out to Don and his team to take a look at that. And then finally, reaching back, Tom's introduction of Heather. Most recently, I've had the opportunity to actually participate, as I am part of the New York State, the Business Council of New York State. And I would tell you that they are, and we are very proud also to recognize the fact that recently, under Heather's leadership, the Business Council was, first to tell you that she also sits and serves in the Executive Committee of the National Association of Manufacturers State Association Group, a national prominence and recognition. Second to that, though, they received and were awarded the 2024 Leadership Award for State Manufacturing Associations from the Conference of State Manufacturers Association. They received that award just recently. And they also just received the 2024 State Chamber of the Year Award from the National Association of State Chambers. The pride here comes in the fact that no state advocacy group has ever won both of those leadership awards in a single year. So, Heather, that was a great accomplishment under your leadership, and thank you. Thank you for that. And the Business Council is a wonderful group to hear voices, to get an understanding, to be advocates for you, and I'd encourage you to participate when you can in that organization also. That being said, our next segment would be the panel is sort of a conversation about how the policy shift is really creating opportunities and challenges for this strained manufacturing sector that we're faced with. And I think what we've heard from Don most recently, and Corey and Hugh earlier, sort of fits in with the approach that we've had in terms of the conversation. So with that, we're going to talk a little about introduction, industry challenges, get their oversights into opportunities, and then just kind of bring it all together. So with that, Heather, I think, starting in that conversation, we heard Don just now talk about the challenges that are being faced, workforce, income tax, and regulatory environment, everything that the Business Council does and you, in terms of your leadership, has been driving the manufacturing environment here in our community as a great advocate. I mean, what brings that desire and commitment every single day to help our community to deliver that?
So first off, thanks for the great commercial for the Business Council. I really do appreciate it. Really proud of my staff and the guidance of the board that got us in a position where we could receive the recognition. It's really great. I grew up in Syracuse, New York, once a manufacturing, powerhouse. They, ironically, Carrier invented the air conditioner in Syracuse, New York, which made it possible for people to move to Florida and Texas. So,
Right.
But part of my job is I go visit manufacturers across the state and see what they contribute to the communities. And as part of the private sector, manufacturing has a very strong impact in terms of economic gains for people in the communities. And while the way that we manufacture has changed significantly over the years, it remains true that having a job in a manufacturing facility is something that can lead to prosperity, and the communities that have strong manufacturing and robust industry tend to have higher standard of living and are better places for people to live, and that's part of our mission, is to improve, create strong communities. It's not just about raising the profit margins of our members.
That's great. Thank you for that. Tom, we're excited. Thank you for coming.
Thank you
bringing
for having
the
me.
Manufacturing
Bring the
outlook
show on the road. Yeah.
on the road. We're very appreciative of it, and a long tenure, these 15, 16 years that you've been doing it, we're highly appreciative of that too, so thank you for that. You're a trusted advisor. You are our subject matter expert when it comes to manufacturing nationally and regionally. It's been so important to our firm. What do you think the dynamic middle market manufacturing companies are doing to maintain their importance? And what are they doing to really develop future opportunities in the communities in the region, given the fact that most of them are in infancy, and we don't even know who they are today?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
It's like I said it in my presentation. As bad as COVID was, it really was the light bulb moment for manufacturing. And you really took notice that in that executive report that came out by the Biden administration, that our small and medium-sized businesses have kind of been disrupted. And you're like, we kind of went with it because we were shifting to a service-based economy, but our future is really, I think, predicated on the success of our middle market businesses, companies that we never heard of, companies that I go out to that are $200 million or $100 million and working on some of the most crazy innovations that you would ever think of. And you're thinking, and like, it'll ultimately end up in, to a big tier one or an OEM or, and so, when I think about that the regulatory, that piece of it has to be, as clean and easy as possible for small business to navigate. Taxation is a big piece of that, correct, as we just saw. But I think, most importantly is the capital to drive the growth in this sector is what is truly needed for the next round of growth to occur. You saw it's been very flat. We lost a lot of manufacturing and it just flattened out. Now we need this next wave. We have just what we mentioned, right? Lots of supply chain, lots of opportunity in front of us. And actually, McKinsey did just about a week or so ago, they had one of their podcasts was around that the future is in not the billion plus, the Fortune 500 companies that they work on, but it's in this middle market. And I'm like, that's it. We're going to be presenting on that. And so it is getting recognized and it is driving. It maybe doesn't feel it's happening as fast as we'd like it to, but I am starting to see some reimagining of manufacturing that I'm so excited about. And whether you like the government investment part of it or not, but the CHIPS Act was very vital, and that supply chain is very robust and very heavy, high-paying jobs. And so very, big win for New York and some other states, Ohio, Arizona. So yeah, I'm really, I think that's what's most important is making sure we recognize and not, a lot of the dollars tend to flow to big organizations, but we need to get some dollars down to our middle market.
Heather, to that point, we call it the dynamic middle market, as opposed to the larger Fortune companies. Where do they find these entities that are in infancy or that we don't know where they are now and they're in a pre-market discovery type of concept? Where can they find a place to get a good advocate for them in the community?
Come to New York. I would say this, we have in our membership, the vast majority of our manufacturers would be this middle market size. And there was a reference to the CHIPS Act and the pandemic, and I would say both of those things represent what I would look at as a significant shift in thinking at the highest levels of government. Yep. That we recognized that we had some real big supply chain issues, a lot of dependency on offshore manufacturing, and there was a very deliberate program put in place and by the federal government, the CHIPS Act, but it's framed as a national security issue. Because obviously chips are a part of many of what we do and everything that we do, right? EVs, solar, but also, every car's got a chip in it. Everyone's got a computer or smartphone. And we are now aggressively trying to reshore the manufacturing of chips. And the result of that is now that companies that make component parts, for example, silicon carbide is used to make chips for EVs and solar panels. There is a new interest. There's a ton of small companies that are working on creating the process so that they can be manufactured here in the U.S. And as a result of that, the companies that make the furnaces are going to have some growth, right? And I can think of examples of both of those in New York State. But there were also significant headwinds faced by a lot of these manufacturing companies. New York, certainly workforce is a national issue, and we are very engaged in solving that problem. But New York also has some very specific challenges, primarily around energy, because manufacturing, generally speaking, is energy intensive, and we've got some to be artful, we've got some policy overreaches that need to be adjusted.
Sure. You mentioned workforce, energy being important. What role really, Don's presentation came to light. The one tag that I kind of focused in on was the income tax and the regulatory perspective, and we hear that a lot. What do you think about the challenge in New York State specifically, and then nationwide?
Yeah.
We talked about SALT earlier, even though that's personal, but what's your take on that?
So interestingly, New York does have some attractive business income tax rules specific to qualifying manufacturers, and you can't just buy something somewhere else, put a label on it and say it was made here and qualify. But if you own property in the state, there's essentially a zero, I think, business tax on manufacturing profits, manufacturing income, which is very under-touted, I would say. But we also have very high personal income tax. And for smaller companies that may not, where some of the income is taken in the form of income tax, it's not competitive to other states. And there is a misunderstanding amongst elected officials as to whether or not high-income earners are willing to move. I think you will hear them say, oh, well, New York has more millionaires than it did before the pandemic. Well, maybe. They have 401ks, but not millionaire income earners. We're one of 2 states to actually lose them post-pandemic. And it is because of some of the hostility towards high-income earners that is, frankly, counterproductive to the state.
I would agree.
And as far as the regulatory climate, I mean, always first top of mind for me is going to be energy policy. It's hard if you own a manufacturing facility to make a decision to invest in, say, new equipment if you don't know what your energy source or your power source is going to be, because we are currently under a legislative mandate to go zero carbon by a fixed date. That is soon. And it addresses sectors differently. So more than half of carbon emissions in New York come from buildings and transportation, but the electric generation side, which actually represents one of the smallest, is under a mandate that is much accelerated compared to the rest of it. And New York obviously only represents a very small % of carbon emissions globally. So we're, to some extent, creating a situation where companies may actually consider moving out of state and go somewhere where the generation is less clean, and then you've got an increase in emissions globally. So, so there's a lot to be sorted out. I think the policymakers are becoming aware. But that is part of what my organization does, is we try to speak to the regulator, to the legislature, and the government to say, hey, you need to consider some of these other factors that, while your idea at the end of the day is good, putting deadlines and putting strict measures in place lockstep without considering the cost and the impact on employers in the state is a mistake.
Yeah.
Spot on. I absolutely agree. Yeah.
Do you think, given the context again of Hugh's presentation relative to productivity and the growth of post-COVID, post-pandemic of the manufacturing sector, and then coupled with the conversation that Don brought today, which was the response that many don't think that there's profitability to be maintained in manufacturing in the state or in the region, what's your take, just generally?
I think that the CEOs of manufacturing companies in particular are not going to, have an instantaneous reaction to a shift in policy. You actually need to see it and feel it on the ground. So first, with respect to productivity, I mean, thank goodness, right? I had a conversation with a member of Congress, I won't name him, several years ago before the pandemic. And he said, well, automation is going to be terrible because all of these people will be displaced and won't have jobs. And I said, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think the only way we can maintain GDP and productivity is through automation. And, I was right. Okay.
You're right. You're spot on.
Is he still a Congress?
That's what we spotted.
Yeah, we have a demographic problem, right? I'm Gen X, the depressed, sort of sarcastic, love Pearl Jam.
Me too. I'm right there with you.
We're a really small group of people, and then there's the millennials behind us. But overall, the workforce is, not growing at the rate that it would to continue GDP growth and productivity. Well, I say GDP growth. Thankfully, productivity has increased because of automation, and it will because of AI. And these are good things, and that is what will save us, I think. Now, there's kinks to be worked out, but if you look at history, I mean, I have horses, right? And the person who puts shoes on a horse is a farrier. When the automobile came along, there were a lot of displaced farriers. Eventually, they found jobs somewhere else, but you can't create policy around making sure that the farriers can always be farriers. It just, that's not how the world works, right? And so
Can't
the
turn
people
back
who
clock
are-
and time.
Yeah.
You can't turn back time.
People who are in jobs now that maybe won't exist or will be displaced need to be retrained for new jobs. And, thankfully, or not thankfully, I guess, there will be more productivity per job that will result, I think, thankfully. And so, it's just a matter of leaning into the change and adjusting as you move forward, because if you just sit back and say, no, I'm not doing it, you're just going to get left behind.
Yeah.
And that's exactly to follow on that. I truly worry about some of our small middle market businesses that are maybe 50 employees and less. And, will they embrace the rate of change that's coming? The adoption that's needed is so critical to kind of, this next big revolution that we talk about, transformation. We got to be able to take productivity up to compete globally. I mean, that's the real crux of it, is we have to find ways to compete globally. For those that are competing on cost, they're still going to probably still try to chase those low costs. So we have to move up the value chain, and it's going to take more skilled labor, right? So there'll be a differential. But again, we will be better off at that when that occurs. So.
And I'm not under oath, so if I'm wrong, I can't be charged. But I recently saw a presentation which basically showed U.S. productivity versus other countries around the world, and my recollection was we were by far the most productive country. So, hopefully we stay there.
Right. Tom, you started to mention the productivity is a competitive, necessary approach to this challenge. What, in the practice and what you're seeing nationally in the manufacturing sector, what are the key competitive opportunities you see for middle market, larger firms when it comes to dealing with these challenges? What do they have to develop internally?
Interesting enough, there's some, very kind of what I call the low-hanging fruit, right? And, actually Don had it up there, is what we're doing right now in this kind of uncertainty period is really trying to wring out excess costs that some of it's come out of COVID, right? We've accepted a lot of price increases. We've seen revenue grow, but we've seen bottom lines maybe not as profitable or erode in some cases. So how do we get that back? How do we get competitive? Charlie Clevenger leads our business optimization team. We've done a lot of work with clients on procurement, what they spend on, what they buy, shop floor. I can think of an example of a client that we had in 2015-16 timeframe. Very competitive in a plating business. A lot of these platers came online in China and Mexico, and I won't name the OEM, but the OEM said, here's your new new target price on the next gen, right? So I get a call and they're like, Tom, we can't get past material costs. I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? Literally, I mean, the price went down almost 100%. And so this particular company lost $25 million of business overseas. Fast forward, through technology, through automation, through what our teams helped with, we've closed that gap substantially. Cost in China has gone up, so the target has moved substantially up. And so we're winning the next generation work here. And that's, they're de-risking, and so is it a little more expensive? But not much. So we're getting close in certain sectors, not all. So having a real, and we're actually doing this at our Automotive Outlook next month, is really building that culture of continuous cost improvement. And it doesn't mean, scraping pennies and being penny wise and pound foolish, but really looking at return on investment, adding maybe robots, adding, cobots, just little incremental changes mean a lot. And we're seeing that, and we're always pressing on I know my clients to do that. So those are I would say the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. The not-so-obvious ones to me are, like I say, a lot of our small, medium-sized business, nobody's heard of them. They don't market themselves. They don't shout on top, And I have a couple clients that have done really well in marketing themselves. And when I ask them about labor, they're like, we're able to find the right talent. Because through social media, do you know what I'm saying? They're getting more recognition. And so that, everyone's heard of Google. Everyone wants to apply to Google or, Apple or whatever it is, right? But no one's heard of XYZ company in, a little town. But that marketing presence, and it's beginning to build. And I think some of our smaller middle markets are doing a much better job of that and seeing some results from that. But we do think, and just what Don had up there is about, they need to reinvest in it. They have to take control of the situation. When I started my career, there were so many apprenticeship programs when I used to go out to clients. And after 06, 07, it just like it stopped. And everyone just kind of hung on. And now the average age in manufacturing, I think, is 54 years old. So,
Which is very young.
Yeah, it's very young. Very young. Doesn't feel like, but, and so now we have this, and you saw, there's this big gap of opportunity, and like, who's going to get the talent, and I think we'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but workforce development is going to be critical. Training, education, skilled, I look at Mexico. Their skilled trade schools, way ahead of us. They're graduating more engineers than we are in the U.S. right now. So it's a race. It's a race against time, so we need to, as productive as we are, yes, in the world, there's a lot of segments that are not where we need them to be.
Is policy and regulation one of those? Is there specific policies or regulation that you think could drive in a better way the middle market economic activity that you're seeing, or?
I'm going to give you, since I'm a CPA, I can give you this answer, and it says it depends.
It depends.
I think from a bigger picture standpoint, I think taxation is the number one. It is still a number one driver that either for some reason that tends to move capital around to different areas in the U.S. or other countries. It does seem to be a big driving force. Skilled labor and talent. So the policies around credits and incentives around talent training, incentivizing like we had with bonus depreciation, I thought was did help incentivize investment in new equipment, absolutely. And the research and development credit, which has now come under, now it's having the reverse effect because of, I won't get into, but Section 174, you're capitalizing your R&D. So we have companies that are making little profit, but now adding back R&D, you're losing from the 163J interest deduction because of how that's calculated. So, these smaller middle market companies, those little dollars mean a lot. And so taxes and regulation, I think, has the most profound impact. It's trying to keep as much in their pocket to reinvest and grow. Yeah.
Good.
We could talk about this probably for
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
So can I jump in on
Of
something
course.
there? Because I think the USMCA and the trade agreements actually are beneficial to some degree, but where we have straight competition in certain industries, for example, the paper industry, you can have very well-run paper manufacturing operations in the U.S., and they're subject to sustainability rules, and they have to have sustainable forests.
Regulations,
Very,
yeah.
very good industry, and there's also labor regulations that may not be in place in countries that are competing. And when you have large purchaser policies, say a state government or federal government, when they do procurement, if they don't factor in these things, they end up buying these materials not from domestic manufacturers, when there should be a way to factor in the conditions under which, do we have a policy objective for a cleaner environment, sustainability? There should be a way to factor that into the procurement policies so that these companies are on a level playing field. I'm not
They're
saying
trying to do
by
that through
US, I'm saying-
tariffs.
right.
I think that's the short-term
Right.
mediation is to, it's
It's-
unfair what you're doing, right? So we're
Right.
going to make it fair by placing tariffs. In some industries, it is needed because of those factors. Exactly right.
And if there are overriding policies that aren't just price, that are important to the country, then they should be considered as part of it. And on the workforce development side, I mean, the thing that you saw from Don's survey is that, yeah, there's a huge opportunity there, right? Because there seems to be just not enough. And what state governments and entities like myself should be doing, and we are doing, is listening to what kinds of jobs they're having difficulty in finding talent. And then we need to crosswalk with the folks who are not currently in the workforce. So people who are in K through 12, people who are in prison, new immigrants, and find ways to make manufacturing an attractive option.
Yep.
We did have a sort of a perfect storm: decline in population and this feeling that everyone must go to college for a 4-year degree instead of going into the workforce with an associate's degree or some skills training. And so we have the opportunities to do all these things, and I can say this, I mean, New York is very aggressively trying to implement a lot of these. I mean, Micron being a huge need for new workforce, and we need to get some people into the workforce who aren't in it right now.
You mentioned his opportunity, you mentioned Micron. We used to talk about global foundries and
Which I worked on that project when I was in the Senate.
a
so,
different sense of time too, but with Micron and the other chip-centric companies in New York and throughout the nation, they've been the beneficiary of the CHIPS Act and New York state legislation, much regulatory opportunity. What's the Business Council now doing to, now that these agreements are in place, what's your role and your leadership position in terms of moving forward to make sure that those entities and all of those that the supply chain evolves with them, what are you doing to assist that?
So, there's a delay while the plant is being built. I mean, obviously, there's construction jobs that there's an immediate need, but the permanent positions in the facility, they're going to come online after it's built and they're up and running, which gives us time to work with the local K through 12 public schools. I grew up in Syracuse. My parents were both public school teachers. The district is extremely interested in forming a partnership with Micron and the community college there to ensure that kids understand that if you start now in 9th grade and there's a program called P-TECH, which is an early college high school, but the kids graduate with an associate's degree. So you get done and it doesn't cost them anything. when you get done with this program, there's a job that's there that you have the skills for that you can walk into. And there are a number of PTECs across the state and across the country. They're all very specific to what the local workforce needs are. The first one was in New York City, it was IBM. And I mean, the beauty of it is the kids who are in these programs, for the most part, were identified as kids who are not college bound. So we're not taking them off the college track. We're taking kids who were, in some instances, maybe even not likely to graduate and putting them into this program. The success rate is very, very good. But if the kid decides at the end of high school that they want to go on to college, now they only have 2 years left to do. So it's really, it's kind of a win-win kind of a program. Well, we've also been talking to some companies that work with people who are coming off of military bases. New York has a military base, and about 3,000 people leave the military base each year. And so, there's an opportunity for skills training. We are talking with the Department of Labor about partnering with some other organizations to do like virtual, basically virtual program where kids could see what these jobs are like in real life, because I think the image of manufacturing, people have an image that is, frankly, just not correct. I love manufacturing floors. I wish my house was that nice. I can't find anything in my house, but on a manufacturing floor, you know exactly where everything is. So, there's tons of opportunity. It is, you need bandwidth. So we need to partner with other organizations, but there are a lot of organizations across the country who are being underutilized, who have the ability to make these connections.
Outside of the chip manufacturing, not only in New York State, but nationwide again, what other sectors of manufacturing do you see needing the support or in a position to expand and grow in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, in New York in particular, there's been some state investment in battery technology, which is going to be very important in terms of using renewables as part of the grid, because obviously they're intermittent, right? You need to have stored power. So huge investment in the southern tier in battery technology, AI in Buffalo through the state university system. There's a lot of effort going into that. And then, of course, manufacturing basically across any sector that is part of the supply chain should be a focus, a governmental focus, because again, we know what happens now when you can't get masks or or things that you need in a pinch. New York also has very strong pharmaceutical presence, very, very critical coming out of the recession. We've got some really great companies that manufacture in New York. And the regulatory structure that they operate under is very challenging.
So with that said, Tom, in terms of investment in the manufacturing sector, you're on seeing the pulse of a cross-section of all sectors of manufacturing. What investments need to be made in the short-term and short-term and midterm to make the whole process and growth of manufacturing successful?
I think, stepping back from the investments are, that's what I presented on a little bit is this sector, there's so much opportunity, and so it's now it's in the limelight, and so when there's opportunity and when there's demand, I think supply will come up. It is access to capital. As you see, I have a lot of clients that, regional banks, and it's still a little bit tight, and some of these are bigger bets, and it's not maybe just meant for senior type capital. So we need to be able to leverage investments from private equity and VC to attract more of that type of dollars. And I said we're seeing it in automotive and mineral capital and getting monies from the government. So I see the access to capital being critical for companies to succeed. And then obviously the investments need to be made in our skilled trade schools. And that'll happen. I see it happening already. I see the states laser focused, even in Michigan that I've talked with. I think we'll bridge that gap, but it's not something that happens overnight. It's going to take. But now that we have the demand, and we know there's a reasonable living you can be made. It's gonna. So like you had up there, I mean, he's projecting growth in employment and manufacturing. And so I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see productivity gains. And so I think you're going to be well positioned for the future for manufacturing.
We talked about the short term, we talked about the midterm, just to bring this to some kind of conclusion, the future. Two questions for both of you. The first one really being, everybody's talking about the outcome of the election. And we've had different perspectives on that. I'm just curious, from a client base, from a community base, Tom, your perspective, and Heather, your perspective as an advocate for an entire Northeast, really, and if not the nation. What do you really see as being the impact of a change in administration or a consistency in administration?
Yeah. I think a lot of my clients, and I think you saw it again on Don's, how manufacturers feels. I think gridlock would be great. I think the stock market would boom. We need a little bit of gridlock. But there's also, where does that lead us to? So, current administration, yeah, you have a little bit of clarity. The ball's already, bouncing down the street, no doubt, on, CHIPS Act, electrification, all in. Now, the return on those investments is to be determined. So, like you say, you saw not a lot of that money's really flowed down to that small business, as Don pointed out, right? So we got to get some dollars into this little, smaller, middle market businesses. So, the election, if Kamala wins, yeah, we're already having discussions around, clients are like, obviously from a tax and estate planning, succession planning, they're looking at it a little more negatively. Some are looking at it as Trump win, obviously, is, probably more positive, for the economy. There's parts of his policy that I don't, the tariffs piece is, good. So it's a mixed bag. It truly is a very divided nation. But I always tell my clients, only focus on what you can control. Focus on your business, focus on what you know. I don't think there's policies that will blow either side out of the water. I think they're both pretty pro-manufacturing overall. So, it is really the hardest part we're seeing is the amount of these strikes, and that's really very disruptive throughout the supply chain. We'd like to see some calmness in the markets from that standpoint.
Heather, politically?
So, go Bills.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think I agree that as far as manufacturing goes, there's probably, although they wouldn't want to admit it, some agreement between both camps. I think the best thing that could happen would be a divided legislature,
Right.
so that we don't have single-party control of our government.
Yeah.
I think that forces
Gridlock.
people to compromise and come to the middle, although they seem less and less. Sometimes they just don't make a decision, but
Right.
but I think they're, overall, picking winners and losers in the taxation and regulatory sphere is usually a mistake. I think it leads to unintended consequences. That being said, I would put a little asterisk next to CHIPS Act because I do believe that it's correct that that is a national security issue. What I think both sides need to do is look at the regulatory environment and figure out what kinds of roadblocks are governments putting up And it's very unfortunate that we have a patchwork of states that have all different rules. To the extent that there could be more uniformity, it would make life easier. We need to take a very hard look at our policies around energy and generation, and whether or not we're acting in a way that is counterproductive when you have states doing radically different things from one state to the next. So I'm very concerned that it's going to be very close. There will be some disruption post-election. I know, through a number of surveys that the voice of business, and particularly small business, has a very high credibility index. So the more that the voices of business can steady the ship,
That's right.
Afterwards, that's going to be very important. But I am prepared for some challenges immediately post-election, regardless. That being said, I'm super optimistic that there's agreement that we need to support manufacturing here in the U.S. And I do hope that, all of the above approach, apprenticeships, reskilling people who are incarcerated, recognizing licenses from other countries for recent immigrants, all of those things are solutions that are out there that we can help us move forward with our biggest challenges.
That's great.
Awesome. That's it.
Well, thank you, both of you, Tom and Heather, for great
It's pretty
insight.
close. Yeah.
As an advocate for the community, for the nation, we appreciate
Awesome.
all that's done. And Tom, your insight into the clients and the community of manufacturing, the sector
We will
in
keep
general.
fighting.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll keep
thank
fighting.
you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
You'll end it?
Again, thank you so much for joining.
Am I on? Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the content. We will be sending out the slide deck. Will be available. Give us, Jessica, a few days to that'll probably come out next week. If you have any questions or any comments, we'll be here for a few minutes. Happy to chat. But thank you again. I think we had a really great lineup of speakers today. Thank you again. Thank you.